Most people feel it before they understand it. They're doing roughly the same job, putting in similar effort, earning more on paper than they did a few years ago. And yet, life feels tighter. Rent jumps. Homes feel unreachable. Markets move in ways that don't match reality. It's not that money stopped working, it's that something else started moving faster. Debt. That's the part no one explains clearly. We're taught to think of debt as a burden, something that comes after money, something you deal with later. But in the real system, debt comes first. Money follows. Here's how it actually works. When you earn income, it arrives slowly. Time passes. Work happens. Payment shows up at the end. But when debt is created, money appears immediately. No waiting, no production, no labor required up front. A loan isn't transferred from someone else's pocket. It's created. New numbers, instantly spendable. That timing difference is everything. Because economies don't move based on effort, they move based on flow. And debt flows first. Think about who gets access to new money early. Banks, governments, large corporations, asset owners. They receive fresh money before prices adjust, before inflation shows up, before wages respond, before anyone feels the pressure. That early access lets them act first. They buy assets, they lock in prices, they position themselves. Then the money spreads outward. By the time it reaches regular incomes, the landscape has already changed. Prices are higher, assets cost more, the entry point moved. This isn't a moral failure, and it's not some hidden plot. It's a mechanical outcome of speed. Debt moves at digital speed. Income moves at human speed. And systems reward whoever moves faster. This gap didn't used to be so wide. Credit used to be tighter. Interest rates were higher. Borrowing came with friction. Debt expanded, but slowly, roughly in line with productivity. Today, debt is cheap, plentiful, almost frictionless. Money can be created with a keystroke, in enormous quantities, all at once. But productivity, skills, wages, those still take time. So when new debt floods the system, it doesn't spread evenly. It concentrates. It pushes up asset prices first. Stocks, real estate, anything scarce. Only later does it show up as cost of living. That's why inflation feels sneaky. By the time you notice it, the advantage is gone. And here's the uncomfortable irony. Debt is marketed as freedom. Buy sooner, move faster. Don't wait, don't miss out. And in the short term, it works. Debt lets people and institutions jump ahead of their income. But debt doesn't stop moving. Interest keeps ticking. Payments keep coming. Time keeps passing. If income can't keep pace, the gap widens. And that gap is where stress lives, or people feel like they're running but not advancing. In the next part, we'll look at why the system quietly favors borrowers at the top, why inflation ends up protecting some people while punishing others, and why the economy doesn't actually want everyone to catch up at the same time. Because the risk isn't debt itself. It's what happens when it outruns money. Now, here's where the system gets uncomfortable. Because once you understand that debt moves first, the next question is obvious. Who does that speed actually help? At the top, debt is leverage. It's a tool. Large borrowers don't use debt to survive. They use it to position. When inflation rises, the value of money falls. But so does the real weight of old debt. If you borrowed $1 billion when money was quote-unquote strong and inflation quietly eats away at purchasing power, you're paying back less in real terms. Same number, weaker money. That's not an accident, it's a feature. Inflation punishes people who hold cash, but it protects people who hold debt tied to assets. And the larger the debt, the stronger that protection becomes. That's why governments can run massive deficits. That's why corporations roll debt endlessly. That's why asset owners can appear reckless and still win. They're not betting on growth alone. They're betting on time and dilution. Now, compare that to how debt works lower down. Household debt doesn't come with bargaining power. It doesn't come with policy influence. It doesn't come with flexible terms. Credit cards, auto loans, mortgages. Those payments are fixed, relentless, unaffected by inflation headlines. If prices rise faster than income, the debt doesn't adjust. You do. That's the asymmetry. At the top, debt floats. At the bottom, it anchors. And this is where hype collides with reality. We're told debt is neutral, that borrowing is just a personal choice, that everyone plays by the same rules. They don't. The system treats different borrowers differently because their debt serves different purposes. Some debt fuels expansion. Some debt fuels consumption. Only one of those is rewarded. Zoom out even further. Why does the system tolerate this imbalance? Because modern economies require expansion to function. Spending, borrowing, asset appreciation. If everyone slowed down, if everyone waited, if everyone paid cash, growth would stall. Markets would freeze, tax revenue would shrink, debt servicing would break. So the system gently encourages motion, not collapse, not escape, motion. Enough debt to keep things moving, enough pressure to prevent comfort, enough inflation to reward activity. That's why stability is so fragile now. Standing still feels risky, saving feels inadequate, waiting feels like falling behind. Not because you're irrational, because the environment is designed that way. And here's the quiet truth most explanations miss. The system doesn't need you to fail. It just needs you to keep up. Working, borrowing, paying, repeating. Debt moving faster than money keeps everyone slightly off balance. Too stressed to stop, too busy to zoom out, too focused on payments to question structure. So when people ask why it feels harder than it used to, why effort doesn't translate cleanly into progress, why growth doesn't feel like improvement, this is why. Debt learned how to run ahead, and money never learned how to catch it. So the real question isn't, how do I get out of debt? It's this. What happens to a society when speed decides value, and time itself becomes something only a few can afford?